Hi guys, in our quest to find a new tow car, I thought I would look at places to hire cars, i.e. like Hertz or Enterprise, places like that. And I noticed that Hertz had quite a good offer on electric cars. So we have hired this Polestar 2 for the weekend. So stick with us and we'll let you know what our thoughts are on this video. So this is a single motor long range Polestar 2. Starting with the looks, I actually think it's quite a handsome car. I think it has a really muscular look about it. I personally like the white paint, but I understand that's not to everyone's tastes. It's a halfway house between a hatchback and an SUV in terms of its height. The alloy wheels have a really nice design. These are 19s, but they do a performance version of the Polestar 2, and those wheels look great. I really like the design of the mirrors. They're completely frameless and look really clean. However, just to note, you may need new extension towing mirrors. We use Malenko towing mirrors, and the particular design of those means that they wouldn't suit this mirror design. So we would be looking at needing to change these for some sort of suction cup style extension mirrors. The front lights have a Thor hammer design which I think looks really attractive. Moving round to the rear, there's a really nice light bar that gives the Polestar a unique and distinctive style. Something that I like that serves no purpose at all is this little animated sequence that it plays when you lock the car. Looking at the door handles, they're really practical in their design. There's none of this popping in, popping out like some cars have, and they also have puddle lights integrated into them which helps illuminate the exterior of the vehicle. In terms of practicality, it's a hatchback with a power boot lid. It offers decent storage space with a couple of tether points. Some different trim levels of this vehicle also offer a flip-up boot divider to segment a smaller section of the boot to secure shopping. There's also a little bit of further storage under the floor. Moving around to the front under the bonnet, there's an additional storage space to carry luggage. Most people would probably use it for charging cables, screen wash, things like that, but still nice to have this extra space. Moving on to the interior, I was pleasantly surprised when climbing inside that it didn't feel as cramped as I remembered. Once I'd adjusted the seat, mirrors and steering wheel to my preferred positions, I found there to be more than enough space. You certainly feel like you sit in this car rather than perched on it. It offers a more cocooned feeling which is aided by the high centre console. Initially I didn't really like this, but it does actually offer a really good place to rest your arm when adjusting anything on screen. Additionally, the gear selector is positioned at a good height to rest your wrist on for screen inputs. The quality of the materials is mostly good. I don't particularly like the seat fabric Polestar chose. I personally prefer leather, faux leather or something like that as a seat covering, but this is fine. The seats were relatively comfortable, but perhaps not as comfortable as those in our Insignia, but perfectly supportive enough for us. I was surprised that in this particular version that I'd hired, that whilst the seat base was electric, the back of the seat was manually adjusted, which I think actually feels a bit stingy. Something I really don't like are the cup holders. There's one to use in the front, but when you slide the central armrest forward, it blocks the cup holder so you can't use it, and the second cup holder is located beneath the armrest. It all feels like a bit of an afterthought. Particularly when driving the caravan, I quite like a hot drink, so I would have to sacrifice the armrest for a hot drink. Not dwelling on that too much though. I like the area up front to place your phone, and there's also 2 USB charge ports. This particular model didn't have it, but on higher spec trim levels, it can also wirelessly charge your phone. Just briefly circling back to materials. The materials at the tops of the door and the raised centre console is really odd, and it feels like it would gather marks quite quickly. This particular vehicle that I had only covered 20,000 miles, and it already had some marks on it, which I would imagine over time would make the interior feel quite tatty. Likewise, the gloss black on the centre console was already scratched and not a good material choice, as it's just going to look aged unless it's cared for or wrapped in something to protect it. In the rear, it's much of the same. The central tunnel impedes on-foot space, particularly for the middle passenger, but this might not be an issue for all buyers. For us, it doesn't really matter as I don't travel in the back and we don't often carry rear passengers, so that's fine for us. Let's move on to infotainment. So for me, this is really where it starts to matter more than anything else. The Polestar 2 uses a Google-based operating system. Google Maps is embedded, so you know you're getting up-to-date and accurate maps. If you're an iPhone user, I believe you can use Apple CarPlay, but I personally don't use Apple, so it's not really a concern to me. When using Google Maps, you can have the maps projected onto the driver's display, leaving the center display to be used for media or anything else like battery stats or something like that. One thing I noticed that I really liked when using the sat-nav to navigate to a destination was that not only would it show you your estimated battery percentage upon arrival, but it would also tell your battery percentage upon arriving back to your current location, which I thought was a really neat touch. The pilot system on board works really well. Generally, it kept me well centered in the lane and latched on nicely to the cars in front, adjusting to their speed accordingly. Another thing I didn't really like was the 360-degree camera. The bird's eye view was excellent for seeing parking lines around you when parking, but it does give a bit of a distorted view of anything of height. Also, you can't display the rear view camera and the 360-degree camera simultaneously like you could in the Hyundai Ioniq 5 that I test drove. Also, if I'm being really critical and nitpicky, the cameras didn't have the same colour temperature. That could possibly be due to the lighting around the car, as obviously some areas of the car are in shade. And also the images didn't stitch together perfectly. It's really not that bad, but it's not perfect. Another thing, you have to touch the screen to change between the rear view and the 360-degree view, which is a bit of a faff when you're trying to manoeuvre. Looking more closely at the rear view camera, it does have a bit of fisheye distortion going on. It's good to help you see what might be coming if, for instance, you're parked forward in a bay and there's cars parked either side of you and you're trying to reverse out to be able to see what's coming from the left and the right. But it does make it more difficult to sort of gauge depth perception. Lastly, I couldn't actually test the Polestar app for this vehicle. I am led to believe that it's quite basic in its functionality. I don't suppose you can have it all. So let's move on to the drive-in. Getting into the vehicle is really simple. The key detects when you're in proximity and you can open any door with the keyless entry. You don't have to go and unlock all doors at the front door before you can open the rear door. Simply get in, seatbelt on, foot on the brake and select driver and reverse. It's as simple as that. I really enjoyed driving the Polestar 2. There was ample acceleration and I was only in the single motor front wheel drive variant. Traction control worked flawlessly. Even under the hardest acceleration, I couldn't make the wheels spin from a standing start. That said, I didn't drive it in the rain, so I can't comment on how it performs in the wet. I personally would want to opt for the all-wheel drive dual motor version with a tad over 400 horsepower, as I fancy a bit more poke. But this was entertaining enough to drive. I found the suspension a touch firm, but acceptable for me. If you're overweight like I am, the UK's gloriously uneven road surfaces will highlight all of your wobbly bits. The regen braking was strong, and it brings you to a complete stop, which is new to me, as my prior EV would slow the vehicle down to just a creep. It's easy to modulate the accelerator to slow down to a complete stop without using the foot brake, and you can't feel the friction brakes bleed in to bring the vehicle to a complete stop. In general, I really enjoy driving the Polestar and would be happy to drive it day to day. The gap between the interior mirror and top of the dashboard does feel a little bit like a letterbox, but it sort of suits this hunkered down style of car. Rear visibility was average to poor, as the aperture isn't that large, but I didn't really have any issues. Moving on to charging, I couldn't properly range test this Polestar as we didn't have it for long enough, but you're easily going to get north of 200 miles. When I collected this car from Hertz, the onboard computer said that it had 290 miles right at the beginning of our hire period, but I can't say if that's realistic or not. Also, I can't comment on how the dual motor compares in terms of range, so it's probably best not to talk too much about range. During our time with the Polestar, we did a quick charging test at Pease Pottage, something that I wanted to do. Essentially, what I wanted to know was, if you arrived at a service station, wanted to go to the loo, get a hot drink and continue, how much charge could you bung in the car? Obviously, this is going to vary depending on your state of charge upon arrival, but it's still something that I wanted to try. Hi guys, we've just stopped at Cobham Services as we're en route to drop the car back, and I thought I'd do a little test. We've arrived, it's just clicked onto 26% battery level, 90 miles of range. Bill's going to go get a coffee, aren't you? Go to the loo, get a coffee and come back and just see how much range we can realistically add. So off you go. See you in a bit. You see Bill there, just coming across the car park. So, what's that, 58%? So, 26, 32% increase and 110 miles of range added in, it was less than 11 minutes. 11 minutes and 16 seconds, that's how long I've been recording for, so I would say that's quite rapid. In conclusion, to wrap up my short stay with this Polestar 2, my take-home pros and cons lists are, let's start with the pros. Purchase price of used examples is really competitive. Some of the Polestar 2s on the road are now sort of 4 years old, so you can grab yourself a bargain. I think the style and the looks of this vehicle are a real strong suit, and I really like the Google-based operating system. It's great. Obviously you have to take the good with the bad, so let's move on to the things that aren't so good. So that 360-degree camera does not impress. Likewise, the armrest and cup holders, I don't like having to make a choice between having a drink and having an armrest, and the cup holders really are an afterthought. Also, some of the material choices, as I mentioned earlier, I really think that's going to really age this vehicle over time and ultimately make it look shabby. Obviously, if I had longer with the car, I might find other features that I like, likewise others that I didn't so much. But that's just my initial impression over the 2 days that I had with it. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, as that really helps us out. Stay tuned and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye!